Welcome in, everyone. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into something, pretty fundamental to how small businesses operate, and something that I think probably touches all of our communities in ways that we maybe don't even realize at first.
Yeah.
And that is the impact of rising rental prices
Okay.
on small business owners. So we've got a whole range of sources we've been looking at here, from, just the basics of how rental businesses work, to some really specific stuff on the equipment rental industry, and even the effects of things like tariffs.
Right.
So our mission today is to really kind of, pull out those key insights and understand how these increasing costs are kind of rippling across all sorts of different sectors,
Sure.
especially sectors that depend on renting to operate. And I guess ultimately, what does all of this mean for the small businesses around us? What does it mean for for the landscape of these businesses?
Well, it's interesting because it's definitely an area that we need to be looking at more closely.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, we're seeing rising costs across the board in so many different parts of the economy.
Yeah.
And rentals in their various forms
Yeah.
are really, a critical component for a lot of small businesses.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're the way that they access a lot of essential resources without having to deal with the upfront cost
Right.
of ownership.
Exactly.
And so, in this deep dive, we're going to specifically be looking at the impact of these rising rental costs in different types of rental industries,
Yeah.
and really critically, the businesses that depend on them.
Right. Okay, so I think it makes sense to start with
Yeah.
the most kind of basic foundational aspect of this, which is just the rental property itself,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
It seems really straightforward.
Yeah.
But when we think about it carefully, how are these increasing rental property costs
Right.
directly impacting, businesses that need a physical location? Think about that little bookstore you love,
Sure.
or that accounting firm, or even the bakery where you get your coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
You know, our sources indicated that commercial rental properties are like offices and retail locations.
Right.
They're like a huge
Yeah.
part of this rental business ecosystem.
Right. Right.
And so picture like a local clothing boutique,
Yeah.
maybe it's one you like to go to,
Yeah.
and their lease is about to expire,
Right.
and the new rental rates
Right.
are way higher.
Yeah.
That's a direct hit to their, financial health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For those businesses that require a physical space to operate,
Yeah.
whether it's to, serve customers or store their inventory or just provide that workspace,
Right.
the cost of their lease is often a really substantial portion of their regular expenses.
Yeah.
And when those costs go up sharply or considerably,
Mm-hmm.
it can threaten their ability to even stay in business. It forces those small business owners into really difficult positions. Can they absorb the increase without cutting corners in other essential areas?
Right.
Do they have to raise their prices and maybe risk losing customers?
Yeah.
Or, pricing themselves out of the local market?
Yeah.
And then in worst case scenarios, do they have to consider relocating to a less desirable spot?
Right.
Or even closing their doors entirely?
Yeah.
This really emphasizes how interconnected the commercial real estate market is with the health of our small business communities.
It does. Okay, so now let's think about the businesses that don't primarily rent out property,
Okay.
but they heavily rely on renting equipment
Yeah.
to do what they do.
Right.
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 And this is where we see a whole other layer of this whole impact thing, because now the cost increases can come from a bunch of different places.
Right.
We saw in one of the sources about tariffs that when the companies that are renting out equipment face increasing costs themselves, maybe it's tariffs or maybe it's just the cost of maintenance and replacing stuff,
Yeah.
those costs often get passed down to their customers,
Right.
who are usually small businesses and independent contractors.
Absolutely. It's this chain reaction.
Right.
If the companies that are providing these essential tools
Yeah.
and machinery and vehicles are having to pay more to get them and keep them running,
Right.
it's almost inevitable that it's going to show up in the prices they charge.
Right.
And that, of course, directly affects
Yeah.
all those small businesses that rely on being able to rent that equipment
Yeah.
on a short-term basis
Right.
without having to buy it outright.
Yeah.
And, for a lot of them, that rental model
Yeah.
is what allows them to get started and stay competitive.
Right. So let's look at some specific equipment rental industries and think about the kinds of small businesses that are relying on them.
Sure.
Like, what about box trucks? How would higher costs for those rentals affect all the different small businesses we see?
Well, with box truck rentals, The impacts are pretty wide-reaching. Think about those small independent moving companies
Yeah.
that are operating locally.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of them,
Yeah.
their main asset, the vehicle they use to do their job, is rented box truck.
Right.
So when those rental fees go up, it directly cuts into their profit margin
Yeah.
on each job, and it might even force them to raise their prices for their customers
Yeah.
who are already dealing with the stress of moving.
Right.
And then you got delivery services,
Yeah.
especially those that are operating on a local or regional level.
Right.
They rely on these types of vehicles to get goods where they need to go.
Right.
Even established retail businesses like a furniture store that offers delivery,
Yeah.
they're going to feel the pinch
Yeah.
of higher box truck rental costs and their overall expenses.
Right.
We even saw in one of our sources that box truck rental was actually highlighted as a potential business idea itself,
Oh, wow.
which just goes to show how vital those vehicles are
Yeah.
to a whole range of other commercial activities.
That's interesting. Okay, so what about something a little more specialized, like vending machine rentals?
Okay.
How could those higher fees impact small businesses?
Well, when it comes to vending machines,
Mm-hmm.
it's the folks who operate them
Yeah.
and keep them stocked that are going to feel it.
Okay.
Think about the vending machine in your office break room
Yeah.
or at the gym or the community center.
Uh-huh.
If the rental fees for the machines go up,
Mm.
those small vending businesses
Yeah.
are going to have their profits squeezed.
Right.
They might try to absorb the cost,
Yeah.
which, cuts into their already probably pretty tight margins.
Right.
Or they might have to raise the prices of the snacks and drinks and everything,
Yeah.
which could lead to lower sales if people think it's too expensive.
Right.
It's a tough balancing act for these often really small ventures.
Yeah.
One source actually listed all kinds of different vending machines,
Oh, wow.
from your standard snack and drink ones to some really specialized options,
Right.
which just shows how diverse this little mini industry is
Yeah.
and how widespread the effects could be.
Okay, so car rentals.
Yeah.
I think we all kind of immediately think of consumers renting cars for travel and things like that.
Yeah.
But what about the challenges faced by small business owners? How does this all connect?
Well, think about the increasing number of people who are driving for ride-sharing services.
Yeah.
A lot of those drivers don't own their own vehicles.
Right.
So they're renting to provide those transportation services.
Okay.
If rental costs go up,
Yeah.
it hits their earnings per ride.
Right.
And it can make it harder for them to compete with the bigger companies
Yeah.
that might have completely different ways of handling costs.
Right.
And then you've got those local tourism companies
Okay.
that give guided tours.
Yeah.
They often rent vans or larger cars
Yeah.
to take their groups around.
Right.
So those higher fees
Yeah.
mean higher operating costs for them,
Yeah.
which might force them to raise their tour prices
Right.
and then potentially get fewer bookings.
Yeah.
One article we looked at actually broke down all the different types of car rental businesses,
Oh, wow.
like local rentals, airport rentals, and even specialty rentals,
Right.
showing how vital car rentals are
Yeah.
in supporting all sorts of business models.
What about something more localized, like bicycle rentals?
Even with something like that,
Yeah.
which seems pretty specific geographically or even seasonal,
Yeah.
those rising costs
Yeah.
can really have an impact. Imagine a business that offers bike tours
Okay.
in a beautiful area
Yeah.
or a rental shop that caters to tourists.
Right.
If their costs to rent the bikes themselves go up,
Yeah.
maybe because of supply chain problems
Yeah.
or just high demand during the busy season, they're probably going to have to adjust their prices,
Right.
which could affect how competitive they are
Yeah.
and whether people can actually afford to do those fun activities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears a little and talk about dumpster rentals.
Okay.
Who uses those, and how are they likely to be affected by these rising costs?
Dumpster rentals are super important
Yeah.
for all kinds of small contractors
Right.
and service providers.
Well-
Think about the renovation contractors in your area.
Yeah.
Our research mentioned a couple of local businesses in Buffalo,
Yeah.
Contractors Alchemist LLC and Romeo's Superior Home Improvement.
Okay.
They rent dumpsters all the time
Yeah.
to get rid of debris from their job sites.
Right.
The article about tariffs specifically talked about the impact on construction equipment,
Yeah.
and dumpsters are definitely part of that.
Right.
So any increase in those rental costs is added to their project expenses.
Right.
And then there are landscaping businesses.
Yeah.
They rely on dumpsters for yard waste, remove trees, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Even those seemingly small increases in rental fees
Yeah.
can really add up over time
Yeah.
and make it harder for them to give competitive bids
Right.
and maintain a good profit margin.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so sticking with construction, let's talk about construction equipment rentals.
Okay.
This seems like a really big area
Of this.
where rising costs could have a huge impact.
Yeah, independent contractors
Yeah?
and small construction companies really depend on being able to rent different kinds of equipment.
Right.
For a lot of them, buying all that big specialized machinery,
Yeah.
it's just not financially possible.
Right.
The article on tariffs
Yeah.
and the info from Quipley about the most rented equipment
Yeah.
show just how much they rely on rentals,
Uh-huh.
like scissor lifts, for example.
Okay.
Those saw like a 130% increase in demand just this year.
Wow.
And then you've got forklifts, mini excavators, backhoes,
Right.
even bigger stuff like bulldozers. When the rental prices for those go up,
Yeah.
maybe because of tariffs or just general inflation, it makes their projects more expensive.
Right.
This could lead to delays,
Mm-hmm.
higher bids to clients,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even fewer contracts they can get.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough.
That's interesting, though, that the tariffs article mentioned auction platforms,
Oh, yeah.
like Auctions International, as a way to save money by buying used equipment.
Right.
So it seems like some businesses might be thinking about moving away from renting
Yeah.
if the costs get too high.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
For some businesses, especially those that need certain types of equipment all the time,
Right.
buying used machinery through an auction
Yeah.
could be a smarter move in the long run
Yeah.
to counter those rising renter costs.
Right.
But of course, there are other things to think about,
Yeah.
like maintenance storage space,
Right.
and come up with the money to buy it in the first place,
Yeah.
even if it is less than buying brand new.
Oh, right. Okay, so trailer rentals.
Okay.
Who are we talking about here, and how are they affected?
Trailer rentals are needed
Yeah.
for all sorts of things.
Right.
Landscaping businesses use them
Yeah.
to move their lawnmowers and trimmers
Uh-huh.
and other equipment to and from job sites. They
Okay.
use them to haul away yard waste,
Right.
deliver mulch and other stuff.
Yeah.
Farmers might rent trailers to transport their produce
Right.
to farmers markets
Okay.
or move equipment between fields.
Huh?
Even people doing home improvement projects might rent one to
Yeah.
haul lumber drywall or get rid of construction debris.
Right.
So higher trailer rental costs would affect all those people,
Yeah.
adding to their expenses or the overall cost of their projects.
Right.
We saw a source that listed all kinds of trailers you can rent,
Oh, wow.
from basic cargo trailers
Yeah.
to ones for transporting livestock or refrigerated goods.
Okay.
It really shows how big this market is
Right.
and how many different areas it supports.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about something that's often associated with leisure.
Okay.
Party and event equipment rentals.
Right.
How do those higher costs affect small businesses?
Well, small event planners,
Yeah.
caterers, and even people throwing big parties,
Right.
they often rent things like tables, chairs, tents,
Uh-huh.
audio-visual equipment decorations.
Yeah.
If those rental costs go up,
Yeah.
it directly affects the budget for the whole event.
Right.
For small event planning businesses,
Yeah.
it might mean they have to charge their clients more,
Right.
which could make them less competitive.
Yeah.
And for people planning personal events,
Yeah.
it might mean cutting back on their plans
Right.
or choosing simpler options to stay on budget.
Yeah.
One of the articles we looked at said that demand for party and event rentals is pretty steady.
Okay.
So changes in costs can affect a lot of small businesses,
Yeah.
as well as the people who use their services.
Okay, so last one, bus rentals. Yeah.
What kind of impact are we seeing there?
Small tour operators.
Right.
Sports teams that need to travel.
Yeah.
Community groups.
Right.
Even some smaller private schools
Mhm.
sometimes rent buses to get around.
Right.
If those costs go up, it
Mm.
affects their budgets,
Right.
maybe leading to higher tour prices,
Yeah.
increased fees for sports leagues,
Uh-huh.
or fewer options for community events and school trips.
Right.
One source mentioned that there are all sorts of bus rentals available,
Okay.
from little shuttle buses to big charter buses,
Right.
which shows how many different needs this industry meets
Yeah.
and how widespread those cost increases could be.
Right. So as we look at all these different rental industries,
Yeah.
the big takeaway seems to be that these higher prices are really putting a squeeze on small businesses.
Absolutely.
Their profit margins are already often pretty tight.
Yeah, across the board.
Yeah.
Whether it's leasing a storefront, renting a delivery van,
Right.
Getting construction equipment?
or even renting stuff for a community event.
Yeah.
These increasing expenses are eating away at their profits.
Yeah, and like we touched on earlier, this can lead to a whole bunch of negative consequences.
Exactly.
Businesses might have to raise their prices,
Yeah.
which could make them lose customers.
Right.
They might have to cut back on what they offer to
Yeah.
save money.
Uh-huh.
Plans for growth might get put on hold or even completely scrapped.
Yeah.
And in the worst cases,
Yeah.
some businesses might even have to close.
It's true. And, for our listeners, it's important to realize that this isn't just some abstract economic thing.
Right.
This directly affects you.
Yeah.
It means you might have to pay more for services you use every day,
Yeah.
whether it's hiring someone to fix something in your house,
Right.
using a local delivery service,
Yeah.
or going to a community event.
Right.
It can also lead to a less interesting and diverse local business environment.
Mm.
If those small businesses that make our communities so special
Yeah.
are struggling to survive,
Right.
it's all connected.
It is.
Those rising costs in the rental world
Yeah.
create ripple effects
Yeah.
that reach way beyond the businesses that use rentals.
Yeah.
They impact the whole community.
Okay, so to sum up our deep dive today, it's clear that those increasing rental costs are having a huge impact on the economy.
Yeah.
They're making things a lot more expensive for a ton of small businesses
Right.
in all kinds of different areas.
Yeah, and it's really worth it for all our listeners to think about the local businesses they interact with every day.
Yeah.
That coffee shop, that
Yeah.
handyman,
Right.
that organization that puts on events.
Yeah.
How are these increased rental costs affecting them?
Yeah.
It really highlights how interconnected our local economies are.
It does. It really does.
Yeah.
And it leaves us with something to think about as these rental costs keep changing.
Yeah.
What new and creative strategies might small business owners have to come up with
Right.
to deal with these pressures and stay a part of our communities?
That's a good question.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to be a big part of shaping the future of small businesses in the years ahead.
Yeah. Definitely something to think about.
All right. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time.